Hello and welcome to this month's Music Community Sessions. I'm Ben Givers with Dolby Laboratories on the Music Partnerships team based in Los Angeles. And in this month's session, I am so excited to welcome Dolby's Director of Creative Enablement, Greg Chin, from his studio in Miami. He is going to share some exciting updates to the Dolby Atmos music creation tools that you will definitely want to know about, including a couple of quick tips and tricks for Dolby Atmos music mixing in Logic Pro, Presonus Studio One, using the Dolby Atmos renderer, and a couple of pro tips that you can start using in your workflows today. So if you have questions for Greg, please add them here and he'll answer them shortly. And before I turn it over to him, I wanted to share a couple of exciting things happening around the world of Dolby Atmos music, starting with a new Dolby Atmos Studio Spotlight video showcasing Studio DMI. This is a mix and mastering studio located in the heart of Las Vegas, which is the vision of Grammy Award-winning mix engineer Luca Protools. Luca, Rob, and the Studio DMI team have been on the cutting edge of electronic dance music for years, and they have recently been doing Dolby Atmos mixes for artists like Daft Punk, Diplo, and Skrillex. You can get an inside look at their beautiful studio and the theory behind how and what they do to preserve artistic intent in their Dolby Atmos mixes at Dolby's YouTube channel, where you can also check out all the studio spotlights from the past and to hear from the creators' video series. Also in the world of electronic music, the Dolby Europe team recently showcased Dolby Atmos music at the Amsterdam Dance event over several busy days, with artists and fans getting a feel for the latest Dolby Atmos music creation tools and experiences, including the Dolby Atmos Mercedes-Benz Hangout at Q Factory, a Dolby Atmos live performance with the artist Ludwig at Stamp Studios, plus the Dolby Cinema premiere of his documentary in Dolby Vision and in Dolby Atmos, which is also available in Vision and Atmos at the site onair.events, and a screening of our friend Max Cooper's Unspoken Words film in Vision and Atmos. So amazing work by all involved in that. You can check out the recap video at Dolby Europe's LinkedIn page. Really cool stuff going on there at ADE. A huge shout out to the team at Dolby Institute for the amazing work they continue to do, furthering Dolby Atmos music education and creating opportunities for emerging music creatives. They've just wrapped another Dolby Atmos Music Accelerator, which is a program we've highlighted on our community sessions several times, this time in Berlin, Germany, with our friends at SAE Berlin, Genelec, and We Create Music. You can check out the recap video at dolby.com/institute, showcasing the team and their industry expertise, providing hands-on education, mentorship, and learning resources to assist 25 emerging music creatives working together to create new original music in Dolby Atmos. What's really cool is you can also get a listen to the new tracks from the Berlin Accelerator, as well as the tracks created at the previous accelerators in San Francisco, Austin, and Miami at dolby.com/institute. Huge shout out to John, Amanda, Brandon, and the entire team at Dolby Institute for all of the great work that's happening over there. Dolby Institute's also where you'll find the Dolby Atmos Essentials course, which covers all the topics you need to get started for creating content in Dolby Atmos. That training is delivered through text, graphics, and short videos. The core concepts are covered, including components of a Dolby Atmos studio. Various workflows are covered with specific training on using the Dolby Atmos renderer and a range of DAWs. Post-production and Atmos music focus exercises are included, along with demo and exercise content. It's super awesome. It's completely free, so be sure to check that out at dolby.com/institute. And over at professional.dolby.com, which links to our pro site, that's where you'll also find free trial downloads of the Dolby Atmos renderer and Dolby Atmos album assembler, as well as tutorial and quick start videos for both of those, plus links to the Dolby Atmos Music Knowledge Base, which is also a forum and FAQ where you can ask questions and interact with the Dolby community and support teams. Our studio's onboarding page and best practices live there as well. You can check out our community sessions homepage for deep dive sessions on the studio onboarding and best practices with Dolby's Emma Brooks, the Dolby Atmos renderer with support for head tracking devices, and several sessions on the album assembler with Jordan Glasgow and Finn Barnes, and mastering engineers from across the community at our community sessions site or our YouTube channel as well. Finally, wanted to share a recent podcast episode produced by our friends at Music Biz Association, featuring Dolby's head of industry relations, Christine Thomas, as she sits down for a chat with Music Biz president Portia Sabin to share an overview of the Dolby Atmos music ecosystem and how Dolby Atmos music creates new business opportunities as well as creative and consumer experiences for all. So Christine shares a bit about the evolution of Dolby Atmos and where we're headed in the future. So definitely check that out at musicbiz.org, whose mission is to create and educate the global music community through conversations and events. All right, with that, let's jump into our conversation with Greg. All right, so happy to have Dolby's Director of Creative Enablement, Greg Chin, joining us to share some partner updates and workstation tips. What's up, Greg?
Ben, great to see you as always. Thanks for having.
Absolutely. Great to see you as well. So for those who may not have seen our last session or have had the pleasure of seeing you out in the world in the past few months, can you share a little introduction and what your role is at Dolby?
Sure. Thanks, Ben. So yeah, great to be here. I've been here now for just about 3 months. I want to say thank you to everyone. I've been out in the field with you, Ben, with the rest of the music partnerships team, really getting to meet a lot of our partners and creative folks out there. I am the director, like you said, the director for creative enablement for Dolby Atmos for music, specifically on the music partnerships team. So my role here, along with the great team, is to make sure that all of our great creators out there are enabled with our tools, understanding of what's going on in our ecosystem, which there's so much going on, obviously from the professional side all the way down to the consumer side, and how people are taking in and listening to Dolby Atmos. And it's a lot of fun. And today we're going to be, I get to share some really cool, some news, show a couple of tips and tricks, and even warm us up for what's coming in the new year a little bit.
Awesome, man. Well, I know people are excited to hear what you've got going on, and the people that have had the pleasure of seeing you out there in the world at the various events you've been doing and supporting over the past couple of months are really excited at everything that you're bringing. So we are as well, man. So you've got a cool, exciting new update to share with one of our longest standing content creation partners. It's one who you have a bit of history with as well, yeah?
I do, yeah, a little bit.
Right on. Go for it.
Yeah, thanks, Ben. So we're really excited to announce we've got a great partnership with our friends at Avid, and very, very excited to announce that Protools will actually now have an integrated Dolby Atmos renderer built into the software. So our friends at Avid actually announced this a couple months ago over at NAB in Las Vegas. They've been showing it off a little bit. We saw them show it off at AES as well and a couple of other shows. And we're just really, really excited. Now Ben and I will actually do a deep dive into this in our next community sessions, but I wanted to make sure you at least saw it. So here it is on my screen. You can see that the renderer here is, there built in. Of course, you've got all your monitoring, you've got your I/O trim and down mix settings here. So again, I'm not going to really go into too much right here. This will be available soon. There's not a date announced, but really look out for that. We cannot wait for this to be in all of our Pro Tools users' hands, and that's coming soon. So we want to say thank you to our friends at Avid, and really excited for this release to happen soon.
So that is an exciting update we'll look forward to, and will definitely increase flexibility for Pro Tools users and speed up workflows. So Apple Logic Pro obviously is a great workstation that features native rendering and panning and some really cool features that help you take your project from stereo to Atmos. You're going to share a couple of tips with working with Logic Pro?
Yeah, thanks, Ben. So as many of you know, Apple now features an integrated Dolby Atmos workflow as well. We're really super excited about that. And what I wanted to do is, we've got so many Logic users who already have songs that they've worked on, and maybe they want to go back into some of their discography, some of their earlier work, and actually start building Dolby Atmos renders from their previous projects. And it's actually really easy to do that. So if you take a look at my window here, you can see that I've got a session up here, a Logic session, very simple, just a couple of tracks just to kind of make it simple. This is just a regular, normal stereo session. And if we can go into the mixer here, you can take a look at our panning, and you can see that we've just got the normal regular panning going on. So if we wanted to take this session, for instance, and actually now turn it into a Dolby Atmos session, it's actually really easy to do that. So to do that, all we go ahead and do is we head up to our menu, and we're going to go up to the mix menu here. And there's an area right here. You'll see that there's a tab for Dolby Atmos. I'll click that, and then we'll get this window that pops up for your project settings. And all we need to do to turn it into a Dolby Atmos session is just navigate right down here to the area that's called spatial audio. And right now you can see that it's off. I'll simply just go ahead and click on that, select Dolby Atmos. We get a window that pops up that lets us know that the session is going to be converted to a 7.1.2 surround format for mixing in spatial audio. Very simple. We just click OK. And as soon as we do that, get out of this window, you'll now see, if you pull up the mixer, but you can already see that our panning has now turned, the panners have now turned into the surround panners. So if we open up the mixer now, you can see that all of our panning, every one of these tracks are now enabled for spatial audio mixing for Dolby Atmos. If I double click on those panners, you can see that we actually have the surround panner. One of the really interesting things that I really like about being able to have Dolby Atmos integrated into DAWs is that the DAW manufacturer gets to really use their UI, and so you're still very comfortable. It's not something that's going to feel foreign to you. This looks like a panner that is built by Apple in Logic because it is, but it behind the scenes it's doing all of that great Dolby Atmos surround panning work. Now, if we go ahead and head over to our main output here, of course, we also have the renderer. So go ahead and you can select your monitoring format. Here we have the Dolby renderer, and this should be very familiar to you. And of course, then you're pretty much ready to go. Additionally, once you're ready and you're ready to go ahead and render your mix, it's very, very easy to do that. You can simply go to export, and you can actually export as an ADM BWF, as you can see right here from the file menu. So very, very simple. Really easy one, but for those of you who are looking to go back to some of your earlier work, if you've been working in Logic for a while and you want to play around with some of your music in the Dolby Atmos format, very easy to do so.
That's great, thanks. And another great feature of Logic Pro with all its integrated rendering and workflows is you can quickly get started in a pair of headphones, right? It's
Absolutely.
recommended that you always reference in a 714 environment to ensure accuracy, but you can get up and going in headphones in Logic Pro quite easily.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the best things about Dolby Atmos is the ability to just start from a pair of headphones binaurally. And like you said, it's always best to check your mixes in a speaker-based environment, at least a 7.1.4. But of course, that doesn't hinder you from working and experimenting and just really getting into it using your favorite pair of headphones. It doesn't have to be a specialized set that you have to go and purchase. Whatever your favorite cans are, you can start there.
Nice, great. Okay, so moving on, Presonus Studio One 6.5 is the latest workstation to release native Dolby Atmos integration, including binaural rendering and speaker monitoring. And you've got a quick tip to share here in Studio One.
Yeah, thanks, Ben. So yeah, very excited about Studio One having Dolby Atmos integrated. It's really been great to see more integration happening across our DAW partners. So yeah, Studio One launched, and also very simple to get into. And I just wanted to kind of quickly show how you can start. So obviously in Logic, I kind of showed how you can take a pre-existing session and turn that, convert that into a Dolby Atmos session. You can do that here in Studio One as well. But what I just really quickly wanted to kind of show you how you can start. So I've got Studio One launched here. I don't have anything open. If I go ahead and just click on the file menu, click new, you can see the dashboard comes up, and you can see here that you've got all of these different templates that you can use. So they've added a new tab here, Mix and Surround. And once you click that, you actually have the option of starting a session directly in Dolby Atmos. Now, the bed format automatically selected will be 7.1.2. Now, of course, you can also, you can work binaurally. So, if you're working, if you don't have a speaker setup that is specifically immersive based, you can work, via stereo format. Again, you can work binaurally. So it makes it pretty simple to kind of set that up. What I wanted to do here very quickly is also just kind of walk you through the built-in tutorial that Presonus has included with Studio One here. So if you just go ahead and if it's your first time, I highly recommend that you kind of do this. A couple of things will change. this tutorial really does a really nice job of walking you through that. So if I go ahead and select the tutorial, click OK, it's going to actually load up. You might have to download and install it in the background, but once that's installed, you actually have this session that will open up, and it will kind of walk you through it. So there's some really good points here to kind of point out. So I'm just going to kind of quickly go through a couple of these. So the first tab here just basically tells you that, hey, you're going to be, this is going to walk you through it. You want to make sure your I/O setup is set up correctly. So you can do that as soon as you kind of open it up. Just go into your I/O settings in the mixer tab and make sure that if you've got a compatible audio interface, that you can actually set that up correctly, including your headphone output, right? And that's done right here in the mixer tab, mixer window. Now, I mentioned earlier that if you've got older sessions as well, just like I showed in Logic, you can actually open those up and convert those to a Dolby Atmos session. So this tab kind of walks you through that, and you do that through the song menu, where you're able to pull that down and then actually convert your stereo sessions to a Dolby Atmos workable session. Makes it really easy. Of course, we have the renderer. And again, as I mentioned earlier, one of the great things is if you're a Studio One user, looking at the render is not going to feel foreign to you because it's built around the UI, very familiar UI of Studio One. So here we have the renderer. There are several things that you can kind of walk through here. Your binaural mode and setting your near, mids, and fars as you need to, including your output channel. And of course, then there's your renderer setup. And here highlighted is the binaural mode if you're working in headphones. There are a few other things, so we'll go through these very quickly. Beds and objects, where the panners are, and there's a few other bits. So I'm going to go ahead and close out the tutorial. And I just wanted to quickly show you a couple of things here. So in this session, this is just the tutorial session, the demo session that's launched. You can see that you've got a couple of different panner types. So here we have the surround panner, and you can see very easy to use, again, built around a very familiar Presonus Studio One UI. And then we've got the object panner. So makes it very simple to kind of get in and out. And then if you needed to go back to the renderer on your main output, you'll just go ahead and click on the Dolby Atmos logo right here, and you'll get the panner. One other thing I wanted to quickly show off that I think is really great, for heights. If you're working in heights on your objects, Presonus has made it really easy to do so. So there's a height meter or level that you'll get on your object panners. So if I've got this object panner up here and I wanted to actually control the heights, the height control is directly right next to it. So you can see right here, I'm affecting the height just by using this slider, this kind of fader here. Okay, makes it very easy, and of course you get the visual feedback as well, and it's a great way to get into your heights and control that. Same thing with the surround panner. You can see that here as well. Let's see, pull that up, and there you've got a visual representation of the elevation and the heights that we're controlling there. Very, very easy. And of course, all the way down to exporting your ADMs. Same thing, file and export your ADMs, and you're basically ready to go. So I hope everyone who's in Studio One has a lot of fun with that. And I'm sure we'll be covering a lot more of that, but just wanted to kind of show a very quick, easy setup for Dolby Atmos in Studio.
Thank you. It's a really elegant implementation, but also very full-featured, and I'm sure the Studio One users are very excited because they've been waiting for this for a long time. So
yeah, absolutely
awesome. All right, and now for Greg's 2 pro tips with the Dolby Atmos renderer, one using the Binaural Settings plugin, and a latency adjustment tip, Greg.
Yeah, thank you, Ben. So one of the things that have been coming up to me in the field, specifically more on the post side, but certainly those of you who are working in pretty large music sessions might run into this. So just to let you know, and it might seem very subtle, very minor, but it is an important one. In the renderer, if you need to adjust latency, you can actually do that. So it's actually very simple to do that. Now we're working in the most recent version of the renderer. We're in version 5.1. So if you need to adjust latency for the renderer, it's very simple to do while you're in the renderer. So I've got the renderer connected to Pro Tools right now. You simply just go into your preferences in the renderer, And right here on the very first Preferences tab, all the way kind of in the middle under Monitoring, you'll see we have a speaker and headphone delay. Now, 22 milliseconds is the amount of milliseconds. This is the inherent latency that is built into the renderer. If you need to adjust it for whatever reason, for sync purposes or whatever, you can actually do that here. And then obviously you want to make sure that you go back into your DAW, make sure that your offsets and everything are okay. But if you need to adjust, to have a little bit more latency so that everything plays back and lines up in the DAW, if you've got extra latency there, you can do that right here. Now, again, very subtle, very simple one, but just want to make sure I call that out because I've actually been on the phone and on a couple of calls, more than a few calls, where this handles that and takes care of that right away. And some folks don't realize that is specifically what that is there for. So that's in the renderer. Now, in version 5.1 of the renderer, along with the updates for some of the plugins, including the binaural plugin, we've actually added a couple of things, which I'll go over here in just a second. But specifically for the Dolby Atmos Binaural Settings plugin, one of the things we've done is we've actually added a couple of user presets. So in Pro Tools here, where I'm using it, if you want to pull those presets up, you just head to the preset area here on the top shell of the plugin and just click where it says here factory default, and you'll see the two new presets. Of course, we have the default 7.1.2 configuration that's been there for a long time, and we have these two new presets. So you can see here there's a 712 bed, which has mid first, and then your objects near, mid, and far. And then the second one features the bed near, mid, and far first, and then objects mid. So it kind of flips them, and that can be super helpful depending on what you're working on. So I just wanted to make sure I point that out because just you may not know where to find it. Now you know where to find it, and that's exactly where that is. So two very quick, easy ones, but they'll be super helpful. So as we get to the year's end, one thing I wanted to take the opportunity to do, because I'm new here, and I think it's just good to kind of recap, as we get to into the holidays. Just remind everybody that we have, the Dolby Atmos renderer 5.1, which was released back in July of this year. Sorry. So here's just a list of what's been added to the renderer 5.1. So we've got support for head tracking devices, improved definition of the head icon and person view, the binaural settings plugin update, which I just showed, and then a few other things. Of course, you can find all of this information on our website at dolby.com. But just to make sure, if you've not updated your renderer, make sure you do so you're working on the latest and greatest. One quick thing I wanted to point out, if you are on a version of the renderer that is before 5.0, you will require a new license. You can make that purchase. You can there's an update fee for that, but it'll get you to the latest and greatest. You want to make sure that you're current in case you're working with other folks who might be using the most current version of the renderer. If you're on something previous to 5.0 and you're kind of trading projects and stuff back and forth, there might be some incompatibility. So just make sure you're on the latest and greatest. And there's going to be a lot more coming as well. In addition to that, we launched version 1.2 of the album assembler back in May of this year. So we've got obviously support for the renderer for the version 5.0 and higher for the renderer. Of course, now we've got Apple Silicon computer support, and we've optimized it for better performance. We've got Ventura support, which a lot of folks needed. Import and export of 96 kilohertz ADM broadcast wave Atmos master files, and import of 96K stereo files. Clip snapping, increased zoom level, and an updated UI. So again, same thing, make sure you've updated to the latest and greatest if your OS and your computer supports it. And just wanted to make sure that I kind of point those out. And I do want to take the opportunity to wish everybody a great, wonderful holidays, and we will be back at the beginning of the year with even more. So thank you guys. Back to you, Ben.
Awesome. Thanks, Greg. And if folks haven't checked out our previous community sessions, which do feature deep dives on Dolby Atmos Renderer 5.1 with support for head tracking devices and the album assembler version 1.2 with Jordan Glasgow and Finn Barnes, please check those out at our Dolby YouTube channel or at professional.dolby.com. All right, with that, let's jump into some Q&A. So if folks have questions for Greg or myself, please enter those into the questions box here in GoTo, and we will do that now. Thank you. All right, Greg and I are back live for your questions. Greg from his command center techno spaceship there in Miami. What's up, Greg?
How you doing, Ben? Good to see
All
you.
right. So thank you to everybody who pre-submitted questions. We had a lot come in, which we'll get to in a minute. And before we jump into that, as many of you now know, and we'll talk about more here in a dedicated session in January and touch on a couple of points here. Just yesterday, Avid officially did release the availability of its natively integrated Dolby Atmos renderer, of course, enabling binaural headphone rendering and speaker monitoring of Dolby Atmos mixes within Pro Tools. So super exciting. We're going to touch on some of that and again have that dedicated session in January. We know many of you are avid Pro Tools users, and so this just represents, more continued momentum surrounding creator enablement and making it easier for artists and mix engineers to use Dolby Atmos mix tools. So super, super exciting. And again, we'll get into it. Thank you for everybody that submitted your questions, and let's jump into them. Greg, the first one from Omar was asked in Spanish. So if you would like to please repeat his question in Spanish, and then we'll do both versions of it.
Sure, I'll do my very best. So, Omar y todos, bienvenido. La pregunta de Omar es, ¿cómo puedo obtener en sí a Dolby para poder disfrutar de todas sus funciones y poder crear, utilizar, ver, escuchar de manera? And the English version of that is basically, you want to take that one, Ben?
Yeah, if I'm understanding it correctly, how do I get access to the Dolby Atmos tools to be able to see, hear, and create? And I know that that's a question that may seem somewhat basic for many of you, but we wanted to make sure that we asked it in Spanish and answered it that way. We have a lot of global viewers, so if you'd like to take that one in Spanish, please, Greg.
Sí, yeah. So, Omar, hay mucha información en el website dolby.com. Hay dos links abajo en el chat ahí, y hay, de Dolby Institute, la página del FAQ, or frequently asked questions, todas las preguntas, una página music.dolby.com, y hay mucha información allí. Y again, los links abajo en el chat. And basically, there's a ton of really great resources. I'll just do that in English as well. And perdón porque español no es mi idioma primer. So, es un gran chiste, pero gracias por your patience. So there's a ton of really great resources available. We've just put a couple of links below for everyone. And there's some great stuff available, at our professional.dolby.com site, our music.dolby.com site, which goes everything from our FAQ showing how to distribute music, kind of goes over a lot of great stuff. So there's a ton of great resources. Ben, I don't know if you wanted to add anything there on that.
Yeah, I think you nailed it. There are a wealth of resources at our pro site, not only for Dolby Atmos, but also for Dolby Vision. And the Dolby Institute team does a lot of work to enable the next generation of creators with the tools to be able to create Dolby Atmos and Dolby Vision. So in addition to the FAQs and the knowledge base that are on the pro site, there's information on how to distribute your music and then how to hear it on consumer devices, which of course there's over 2.5 billion with a B in the marketplace enabled Dolby Atmos devices out there in the world. So check out professional.dolby.com, dolby.com/institute, music.dolby.com. Popped them into the chat there as well. Melissa asks the question, do you have a sample of a mix that I could be able to play at home on my Dolby Atmos enabled amplifier, Greg?
So the great thing, so there, we just mentioned that there's some really great resources available on professional.dolby. So .com. So if you're looking to kind of open up sessions and kind of play around and learn, there's some really great resources there. We've got sessions for Pro Tools, Apple Logic, even for Ableton Live, and a few other resources. So if you're working in a DAW, there's some stuff you can find there. Melissa, if you're specifically talking about playing it at home, on like a, whether it's a Dolby Atmos enabled soundbar or AVR or something like that, actually you can go straight to your preferred Dolby Atmos streaming platform, whether that's Apple Music, Tidal, Amazon Music, and preview music that's been released there. So yeah, I mean, again, just to go back to the original link in terms of if you wanted to do something within your DAW, check out learning.dolby.com. But again, if you're in your living room on your AVR or soundbar that are Dolby Atmos enabled, your best bet is to check out your favorite DSP. Again, right now that's going to be Apple Music, Tidal, Amazon Music.
Awesome, thanks. Raphael asks the question, how much time do you spend on your binaural settings?
I think the answer there is as much time as you need to. So, and Ben, please, feel free, do feel free to jump in. When it comes to binaural settings, I think one of the things I'll just mention quickly is, Dolby Atmos as a format, as a platform. This is there's a lot going on, right? But at the end of the day, it's a way that we as creatives deliver, something that is really cool and special. So there's workflow that's involved there. In terms of, most everyone try to make a comparison between the stereo workflow and an immersive or Dolby Atmos workflow. And yeah, there's certainly additional layers to it. But at the end of the day, it's basically the same work that we're doing. We're just using different tools to do so. So when it comes to, monitoring and checking your mixes binaurally, spend as much time as you need to. One of the great things about the Dolby Atmos tools is they're really, and with our best practices, it's really there. All that stuff is really there to help make sure that translation is great across the board. So we always recommend that as you're working on your immersive mixes, on your Dolby Atmos mixes, spend the time to go back and monitor binaurally. You've got every ability to do that within the renderer, whether that's built into your integrated into your DAW, or if you're using the Dolby Atmos renderer itself. Do make sure that you're monitoring and making sure that levels are coming across well. Translation is exactly as it should be before you deliver something. So you spend as much time as you need to.
Yeah, I think that's a great answer. And if I were going to add to that, I would just say it's a very important step of the process to ensure translation, right? And maintain that creative control, particularly for headphone listeners, which we know a lot of people are consuming that way. Also, some services and labels may not accept mixes with the binaural settings all set to off, for example. So be very careful. You want to use as much creative control as you possibly can. All right, moving on to some questions about reverb, Greg. Hopefully this helps to address Luke's question. Luke also pre-submitted a question. There have been a couple of others, but how best to use different reverbs on different objects, for example, like snares, vocals, percussions with verbs behind you. Luke tends to use stereo verbs. How does that translate into the Atmos world, and any best practices that you can kind of share?
Yeah, so this is so for Luke and for there are a few other folks that have been asking about verbs and really how to use plugins or effects within the immersive space and what that means. We're going to be doing a much deeper dive. In the new year in 24, we're going to be spending a lot of time on things like compression, utility effects, creative effects. So what I'll quickly say here, just because we've got a very limited amount of time, kind of goes back to what I stated when we were talking about how much time you're going to spend binaurally. The work is generally the same, so you really want to obviously you're working in a much kind of bigger available environment. You've got heights, you're able to actually really place objects within the space as you need to. But the sense of space that you're trying to create is exactly what you're going to be using your reverbs and delays to help achieve. There's a few things to think about: beds and objects. So I'll just start there and say that if you're thinking about a sense of space, beds are a really great place to kind of have that. You can actually use a stereo reverb in an immersive environment. There's nothing that says you can't. Experimentation is going to be your friend here, along with best practices. So in terms of reverbs in particular, really think about where that reverb, what the purpose of that reverb is. Is it there to provide a sense of space for the entire track? Great. So a bed is a really great place for that in general. Now, not there are going to be times when, even with a sense of space, you're going to want that reverb to maybe to live in the heights. It may have to live on the sides. It really depends what you're trying to achieve with that reverb. Now, of course, because this is an object-based format, you also have the ability for those objects to travel within the space, right? So it's not specifically, can be a totally static thing. It can also be something that travels. So the question is, does that reverb then travel with that object or set of objects, or do they need to stay within the space, or is it a combination of both? If you approach it really answering those questions first, that really informs what you end up doing with the reverbs. Now, technically, as we start looking at, do those reverbs need to be in a 714 environment? Do they need to be grouped a certain way? We will be diving into that, and I'll do my very best to cover that across different DAWs. But we'll be definitely diving into that next year. There's a lot we're going to be talking about in terms of creating an Atmos. We'll continue to approach looking at mixing an Atmos as well, but we will definitely be covering that. So I know a lot of you have been asking about that. We're hearing you. So I think the first part of that is ask yourself the question: what is this reverb meant to do? And that will really help inform the first part of your decision making. And then we will come back in the new year and start addressing that in deeper dives. Appreciate the question, Luke.
Yep, great question. Great answer as well, Greg. Thank you. I also want to mention that Dolby Institute has just released a tutorial video with mix engineer Luis Del Toro. It's a Spanish language video, but you can turn on the subtitles, and it explores the use of reverbs in Dolby Atmos. So I will pop into the chat here the link to the Dolby Institute tutorials. You might find those helpful. They've actually released a couple of new ones exploring different mix techniques with Luis, who's awesome. So shout out to Dolby Institute as always, and have a look at those amazing tutorials. All right, Greg, moving on to a question from David. Is it possible to mix in 5.1 and convert to Atmos after?
It is possible. Obviously, the way I approach it, and I actually had to do this earlier this year, where I had mixed the 5.1 for a client, and they got very excited about the idea of doing that in Dolby Atmos. So we went back and he actually ended up reworking it himself. He didn't need my help, but so yeah, it is possible. You want to address it the same way you would address a stereo mix. It's a little bit different because with a 5.1 or 7.1, those pieces, those surround pieces, have very specific placements. But really, all you're going to end up doing is making decisions on what ends up in beds and what ends up in as objects. That's really it. Your DAW, either connected to the renderer, or if the renderer is integrated, you're going to be able to then make those decisions very easily. And you're typically going to do that in one of two places. You're going to do that within the main editor and arrange window on a track by track basis, or you'll do it in the mixer, where basically you're going to, as you go and kind of start the conversion process, basically addressing where something's going to live in the 712 bed or as objects. That's basically it. Now, one thing I will mention, you actually don't have to do the work of doing, a stereo thing, a 5.1 thing, and then going and trying to address it as an Atmos deliverable if you're starting from scratch. If your session is started, you've recorded everything, you've got everything there, you can actually work really top down. So instead of kind of having to do these separate things, you can actually go and derive a stereo mix of 5.1. You can fold down 7.1, 5.1 directly from the Dolby Atmos renderer, and you can basically perform several different re-renders. You want to go back and check them, but you actually it's going to save you a lot of time if you're working from Atmos and kind of move down from there. But in this case, for you, Dave, in particular, sounds like you've got a 5.1 mix that was already done. Basically, it's just some work that you're going to have to do in terms of figuring out what's beds, what's going to live in the bed, and what are going to live in objects. And you basically do that in the output of either your editor range window, or in some cases the Dolby Atmos renderer itself, or the output portion of either your mixer or your I/O setup.
Yeah, and I think you really said it. And I think one important differentiation is that there's not like a conversion process to go from 5.1 to Atmos. You'll still need to lay your session out, make sure that you have got as much creative control as possible in the Atmos environment so that that new Atmos mix translates correctly and is its own, piece of art. There's not like a quick conversion to be able to do so.
Right.
So great question, great answer. Moving on to a question that we touch on frequently about, what mastering techniques can be employed with Dolby Atmos. Greg, if you want to just touch on a couple, and I'll share a couple of resources.
Yeah. So, in term for this is the Dave's question around mastering techniques. Is that where we are?
Yes.
Yeah. So mastering techniques, this is something that continues to kind of evolve and change. We're definitely going to, I know that some of the past community sessions, and certainly before I got here, Ben, you would cover that with some guests and stuff. I think you're going to kind of talk through some of that. Definitely, the album assembler, the Dolby album assembler features some, there's a global parameter control that you're able to leverage. That's really super helpful. One thing I'll mention here, and then I'll toss it over to you, Ben, is one thing to really remember about not just Dolby Atmos as a technology, but music creation and audio creation digitally in computers. This is something that's not static. This is something that continues to change. So not to say that we're in early days in terms of mastering for Dolby Atmos. I'm not specifically saying that, but things are definitely going to be changing, and we're going to be getting better. And this is an iterative process. And something we're working with the community on in terms of finding what the right and best practices are. But I'll toss it over to you, Ben.
Yeah. A mastering engineer can certainly improve your mixes in the same way they would be able to do so in stereo. So if you've got a relationship there, and I know there's a number of mastering engineers on the session today, shout out to all of you. Would definitely recommend that you do so. As you kind of alluded to, we've had previous sessions with Dale Becker, Andrew Mendelson, and Luke Armentrout from Georgetown Masters, Mike Munser from Axis Audio, Michael Romanowski joined us early on. We've had Colin Leonard. So tons of resources out there and communication about how best to connect with your favorite mastering engineer to ensure translation to devices, right? That's what it's all about, to ensure that your mix sounds as good as possible on the 2.5 billion enabled Atmos devices out there in the world, and mastering engineers will certainly help that along. So next question is from Diego, and he is asking about subtitled educational content, and I'm guessing that he's asking about, not asking about the community sessions being subtitled in Spanish, but if he is, you can certainly turn on the subtitles on YouTube where all of our community sessions live, and when this plays back, watch it with subtitles in Spanish. But there is Latin language tutorial material available at dolby.com/institute. There's, like I mentioned before, 3 new ones for a total of 6 that are in Spanish. Those are ways to send your Dolby Atmos mixes to your clients, how to use reverb, and does Master Bust exist with mix engineer Luis Del Toro. Also wanted to mention that the self-paced learning curriculum, the full curriculum, is also available in Spanish and 4 other languages. And so a lot of resources out there for you. We popped those links into the chat, so be sure to check those out if you haven't yet. I hope I'm pronouncing Deboit's name correctly, Greg, for you. How do you organize your sessions and lay out your Pro Tools sessions?
Yeah, so in terms of Pro Tools, and this might be applicable to other DAWs depending on, it's really what you're most comfortable with. So efficiency, session efficiency is something that's super important. Setting up your workflow just to be as efficient as possible. Anything from markers, color coding, folders is a really important one. And as I jump further down into Dolby Atmos, folders have really become my best friends, because I'm able to color code and really organize things in folders around I really think about things in terms of beds and then different types of objects. I might have objects that are going to be static, that are really meant to be living in a specific place, that has a specific folder, and that might be however many objects that's going to be. I'll have that color coded a certain way. That's blue for me in terms of things that are going to be a little bit static. Things that are going to move, that have automation and movement around that, those I'll have in a folder that's green. and those are my dynamic objects that will have movement and automation to it. And then I'll usually have a set of folders that will, be specifically geared towards effects, whether that's going to be, parallel compression, some of this, the more space type effects, reverbs, delays that are going to be a little bit more global that live in the beds. It really is just about what's most comfortable for me. So for me, that workflow comes from my stereo workflow, which is exactly how I have my stereo workflow set up, with the exception of the automated pieces that are going to be objects. That's really the main thing that I've added in terms of my workflow, and that will change as I learn more, as I change my own workflow as I'm working in Dolby Atmos. My recommendation would be to kind of, if you have a workflow that works really well for you coming from a stereo environment in your DAW, kind of retemplatize that for the addition of things like beds, objects, and how you approach your mix, and just whatever's going to be easiest for you. Those same tools that are available to you in stereo are available to you in an immersive, in the Dolby Atmos space as well. So use what you've got.
Great, thank you. A number of questions coming in, of course, on the back of the release of the native integrated rendering with the new Pro Tools that was released yesterday. So let's touch on some of this. And again, we're going to have a dedicated session in January addressing a lot of this and demonstration as well. But Greg, could you just address some of the key differences between the integrated renderer in Pro Tools and the Dolby renderer?
Yeah, and this will address, I'm trying to monitor all the questions coming in live in the chat as well. So this will address some of that. So specifically, the Dolby Atmos render application has some differentiation from not just the Pro Tools internal renderer, but also Apple Logic, Steinberg, Cubase, Nuendo, Presonus Studio One. So specifically differentiated in DAR, in Dolby Atmos render application. So MP4 export. I know somebody was asking about MP4 export. I got a lot of texts and emails about Pro Tools. Somebody just asked about Studio One. Will that happen? Don't know if that'll happen or not. But specifically for the Dolby Atmos renderer, these are the differentiating things that the Dolby Atmos renderer has. So we've got MP4 export, array mode, 914 rendering, and other monitoring layouts. For example, 4.0. Speaker calibration is available specifically in the Dolby Atmos renderer. Head tracking, which was announced in version 5.2, cinema rendering. So this is only available in the Dolby Atmos renderer for cinema, obviously, but that is still a differentiator. The Dolby loudness measurement. So Atmos loudness measurement can be performed in the DAW using the 5.1 renderer via an aux track. And of course, there's some third-party plugins or loudness measurement plugins that can assist with that as well. And then of course, the .Atmos DAMF and IMF IAB support, that's only available in the Dolby Atmos renderer. And of course, compatibility. This is also a pretty big one. Compatibility with the Dolby Atmos music panner. Excuse me, I'm tripping up on my words today. Compatibility with the Dolby Atmos music panner plugin. Say that 4 times fast and see what you get. So these are the differentiators specifically for the Dolby Atmos renderer. Now, we got a lot of the questions specifically. I got a lot of the questions specifically around MP4 export. One of the things you want to make sure. So if you take a look at the Avid site, it does mention that there's MP4 export there. That MP4 export is specifically for video with audio embedded. It is not specifically for Dolby Atmos as a Dolby Atmos deliverable. If you want to do that and you need to do that, you'll use the Dolby Atmos renderer application.
Great, thank you. A follow-up question to that about the binaural rendering within Pro Tools. Is Pro Tools using the Dolby binaural renderer, and does it support Dolby Atmos headphone metadata? Yes,
the answer is yes. So yeah, Pro Tools can definitely monitor in binaural. You can go check out there's a couple of really great, there's a blog and in-depth video that kind of covers that. So yes, Pro Tools can monitor binaural in addition to the speaker configs and supports creation of headphone metadata. So that's all there.
Great, thank you. Continuing on, can I use the Dolby Atmos music panner with Pro Tools native rendering?
Yeah, so as I just mentioned in the differentiation for the Dolby Atmos render application, you cannot. So specifically the Dolby Atmos Music Panel requires a connection to the Dolby Atmos renderer application. So if you've got users that are wanting to use the internal rendering in Pro Tools, for that you'll be using the built-in Pro Tools panel, which is really good. It's great, works really well. But if you specifically want to use the Dolby Atmos Music Panel plugin, and the reasons that somebody might want to use that, it's because it's delay-based, sync-based, so you can do some really cool musical delay effects there. You're going to want to make sure that you're using the Dolby Atmos renderer application because it's got to connect to that.
Great. And compatibility with other DAWs. Are ADMs created in Pro Tools compatible with other DAWs?
Yep. The simple answer is yes. Which is a beautiful.
All right. Great. Thank you. Let's see here. So many great questions coming in. Brian asks a question that has been asked by a couple of other folks here. Brian, again, about QCing. What is the best way to easily review or preview mixes?
So there's a few different ways to do it. So if you're doing it for yourself, being able to export and, if you're working binaurally, if you have the ability to check it in speaker environment 714 or higher, that's always the best thing to do. Excuse me. There's some documentation in terms of, being able to kind of sideload an MP4 if you've got a home-based setup, whether that's a Dolby Atmos enabled soundbar, AVR setup, where you can actually preview some stuff that way. You can check that on our site. If you are delivering mixes or content specifically for a distributor, a label, or anything like that, always make sure that you ask them for what their QC process is. They will usually have a required set of how things are QC'd. If you need to QC it on your end, some of them will do it on their end, but you really, obviously, best as you can QC on your side. They will, always make sure that, if you're dealing, whether it's an independent or major label or distributor, you can get their set of deliverable requirements and check through that. There's usually a good QC checks on the stuff that you'll be able to do and do on your own. Really that's really the best place to start. If you're doing it yourself and it's for yourself, figure out what your QC process is going to be. A couple of things to make sure you're looking for: making sure that LFE is managed correctly, making sure the translation is good across speaker-based environment and binaurally in headphones. Again, LFE is one of those that can be a little bit tricky, so make sure that you're managing that correctly in your QC process.
Great, thanks. You touched on this a little bit, but the routing of reverb return when you wanted it to be at least 714, can you just quickly touch on that one more time for anybody that may have missed it? Or,
yeah. So again, we are gonna be jumping into that in a later. We'll do a very deep dive because there are several layers of things to kind of think about and contend with. But just to kind of summarize what I said earlier is, your approach with reverb or time-based effects really has to do with space, creative decisions around effects, whether something's going to, whether that effect is going to travel with an object or a set of objects or not, and whether or not it needs to be a part of the space. If it's a part of the space, generally it's going to live in the bed, 712. But if you're working on, with an extended bus width like 714, then there are other ways that you can kind of go about it. By creating 7.1 path aux paths. Again, we won't jump into that. Just not enough time to jump into that. We will absolutely be covering that. But again, to just go back to the initial thing, which is what is this time-based effect meant to do, and kind of starting from there, which will really get you to the first part of: is this going to live in the bed? Is this going to live with the object, or is this going to even live as its own object to help convey a sense of space, or greater space?
Great, thank you. One more question and then we'll wrap it here, Greg. What is your take on the use of size parameter when mixing creatively? What tends to sound best with, particularly in translation to headphones?
Yeah, so experimentation will definitely be your friend here. The great thing about size parameters is that it really enables you to get those objects with a sense of weight, depth within the space. That's why they exist. So one of the things that we've been talking about translation and checking your mixes, whether from a speaker-based format binaurally, one of the things you definitely want to make sure you're doing is you want to use it, let's say liberally, but you certainly want to be careful with how you're doing that. As a best practice, certainly a lot of folks in the field, will tend to not go past around 20% or so, because things can start getting really kind of hairy. Again, we will cover this in some of our community sessions later down the line. But you want to make sure that you're kind of checking things as you're adjusting and readjusting those size parameters. So the bigger you get, and of course, the more percentage you're adding to that, you want to make sure that things are translating well between your speaker-based setup and your headphone mixes binaurally. So again, 20% is around the limit. But again, experimentation is going to be your friend. You want to make sure you're listening and making sure that weight really depends on what the object is and what it needs to do and how it needs to be presented to the listener.
Great, thanks. Just wanted to remind everybody that in the chat are links to our professional.dolby.com site with the knowledge base, the FAQs, the downloadable content. There's also QC information there, really anything you need. It's also an interactive forum, so you can ask questions and get responses from Dolby Atmos engineers. Also, the dolby.com/institute tutorials are there as well. We shared some of those links off the top, but I also popped them into the chat. So if you have any additional questions, feel free to check them out there. You can also email musicrelations@dolby.com, and we'd be happy to answer your questions offline. Thank you so much to everybody that submitted questions. There were a lot of really great questions, great interaction. We want to wish everybody a very happy holiday season. We're looking forward to coming back in January with an awesome session on Pro Tools pre-NAMM and answering all of your questions, and look forward to seeing everybody at NAMM and CES as well. So with that, we'll wrap the session. Thank you all so much. Greg, thank you. Great job as always. And talk to everybody soon.
Happy holidays, everybody. Thank you. Cheers.